Before we begin the meeting, I'll ask Councillor Donald Crichton to lead us in prayer. Mr. Crichton.
Our gracious God, we give thanks for your goodness to us this day and for all the mercies that we have received from your hand. We give thanks for our health and strength and that we are able to go about our duties and our responsibilities at this time. We give thanks that you are a gracious and sovereign God and that you rule in all things. And through providence, you map out our lives for us. And we see how you deal graciously with us and mercifully with us from day to day. And we pray that we would look to you, to the Lord Jesus Christ, the author and finisher of our faith. We give thanks for the salvation that has been wrought and that you have given to us a Saviour on whom we can trust and whom we can put our faith in. Give us to live by faith and to look past the things of time to eternity, where we might embrace the promises of your word and bind them to our hearts. We give thanks, gracious God, that we can gather today as a Cola. We pray your blessing upon us as we go about our deliberations. We pray your blessing upon the convener as he conducts the meeting. We pray your blessing upon all members and all members of staff and all who work so hard to deliver our services from day to day. We pray that you would bless us in our duties and responsibilities and to carry them out diligently and faithfully and to your glory. We pray that you would bless us in the midst of this pandemic. We pray that you would subdue it, that you would protect us, that you would watch over us. We pray for those who have been affected and and families throughout our communities who are affected, that you would be a wall of fire about them and protect them and usher them back to health and strength, we pray. We pray this for our own communities and for our nation at large. We give thanks, gracious God, that you are able to do all things and that we would put our trust in you for our protection and our safety. We ask now that you would go before us and bless us and keep us and pardon our sin for Christ's sake. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor Crichton. I'll now ask Derek Mackay, Governance and Elections Manager, to read the sederunt. Mr. Mackay.
Goedemiddag.
Ja.
Lida.
Ja.
Mama waterstek RSK August Usterjes. Colin McMillan.
I'm in the house.
Ian Archie McNeil.
I'm in the house.
Donald Manford.
Shaw.
Paul Francis Steele.
I'm Shaw.
Quindevillia August Uster Roddy Mackay.
On the house.
Ian M. McLeod.
I'm Shaw.
Ethan Robertson.
On the house.
Na Herrig August Cana Jason Loch. Grant Fulton.
I'm Shaw.
Paul Finnegan.
I'm Shaw.
John Mitchell.
I'm Shaw.
Skewing August Cana Two in the Loch. Ronald Fraser.
On the show.
Angus Morrison.
I'm Shaw.
Skieran Rue, Noddy MacDonald.
Shaw.
Alistair McLeod.
On the show.
Finlay M. Stewart.
On the show.
Jordan Burgess, Keith Dodson.
I'm Shaw.
Ray King.
I'm Shaw.
Angus McCormack.
Shaw.
Charlie Nicholson.
On the show.
Stuart McAtua. Ian M. Macaulay.
I'm Shaw.
Neil Mackay.
I'm Shaw.
Gordon Murray.
I'm Shaw.
Locatua. Donald Crichton.
On the show.
With apologies from Johnny McKeever. Colin McLean.
Elliot.
Cliff Shearer, Nish. John Mackay. John Mackay.
On the show.
John Norman MacLeod.
On the show.
Kenneth MacLeod.
On the show.
Kenny John MacLeod.
On the show.
30 members present, Convener.
Thank you, Mr. Mackay. With regard to conducting today's meeting, a reminder of the following points, if you don't mind. Please ensure your camera and microphone are off when you're not speaking. I will call on the relevant officer to present their report. If a member or officer wishes to ask a question or raise a point, please do so using the raise your hand function on your device. Please also ensure that after you have spoken, you lower your hand and put your microphone and camera off. Your device should be positioned so that your image is clear to other participants, and please speak clearly and concisely. With regard to declarations of interest, members are reminded of the protocol. You must leave the meeting by ending the call, which will be confirmed by the moderator to the chair. And following consideration of the item, you will be invited back into the meeting by the moderator. Please ensure you are available to accept the invite to rejoin. Before we move on to the agenda, I would like to mention the following tributes. Mr. Alec Matheson. On behalf of the Commonwealth, I would like to pay tribute to Alec Angus Matheson, an employee of the Cornwall Multimedia Unit, who sadly passed away on the 30th of January. Alec started working in the Multimedia Unit of the Cornwall in 2004. He was a hard-working, diligent member of the team who not only undertook work for the Education Department, but for the Cornwall as a whole. A talented artist and photographer, he took great pride in his work. His legacy will endure in the many projects he was part of. His award-winning project, Orang Nuklanyabika, will be enjoyed by the younger generations for many times to come. He was a skilled graphic designer and a great all-round member of the team. His experience, expertise, and friendship will be sorely missed by his colleagues in the unit and the Cornwall. He also was involved with the Isle Air commemorations that were held throughout the islands, and he was a part of that, travelling from north to south. During the recent lockdowns, he worked tirelessly to ensure educational materials and videos were available for school pupils learning at home, and for the benefit of the whole community in the Western Isles. The Cornwall would like to extend our sympathies to his parents, Bella Mary and Roderick Matheson, who live in Back at this particularly sad time. Mr. D.K. MacLeod, on behalf of the Cornwall, I would like to pay tribute to Mr. D.K. MacLeod, who passed away on Sunday, 31st January. D.K., as he was often known as, taught geography at the Lewis Castle College and School before joining the Council's Education Department. Following his time as Director of Further Education, he returned to Lewis Castle in 1985. As Deputy Principal at the college, he managed the building of the premises in both Benbecula and Barra and was instrumental in the location of the first video conferencing learning units in rural areas. He was also heavily involved in the project management of the new Stornoway campus. This was a period that saw a large increase in the curriculum offer at the college and the number of staff and students there. He retired in 2004. On behalf of the Cornwall, I would like to extend our sympathies to Mr. MacLeod and his family at this sad time. Mr. Kenneth Mackay, MBE, I would like to pay tribute to Mr. Kenneth Mackay, former councillor, who was recently awarded an MBE in the New Year honours list. And that was for services to the community of Renigdale in Harris. On behalf of the Cornwall, I would like to congratulate Mr. Mackay on his richly deserved award. Mr. Kenneth MacDonald, MBE, I would like to pay tribute to Mr. Kenneth MacDonald, who was recently awarded an MBE in the New Year's honours list. This was for voluntary service to dentistry and dental training abroad. On behalf of the Corla, I would like to thank Mr MacDonald for his dedicated voluntary service to dental provision and congratulate him on this award. Mr Fergie MacDonald MBE, I would like to pay tribute to Mr Fergie MacDonald, who was awarded an MBE in the New Year's Honours List for services to Scottish traditional music. Mr MacDonald is not from the islands, but has spent a long time entertaining people young and old, whether that be in schools or community centre. And on behalf of the Corla, I would like to congratulate Mr MacDonald on this award. Moving on to the agenda, the minutes. The minute of the meeting of the Corla of the 9th of December 2020 and the 26th of January 2021 are there for approval. I see no hands, so...
Yeah, Chairman. Trying to get... Yeah. Chairman?
Mr Mackenzie?
Convener, yeah, are you taking them one at a time? Because I would like to propose the suspension of standing orders against the 26th of January meeting.
So we're all happy with the minute of the meeting of the 9th of December, and Mr Mackenzie wishes to suspend standing orders in relation to the meeting of the 26th of January 2021. Can I ask you to indicate what that issue is?
The issue is, Chairman, that this was a two-part motion that went through. One part of it successfully. I'm referring, of course, to the executive heads, which was discussed at that meeting. And although the secondary head, as part of that, went through successfully, and that's not an issue here, I do refer to the primary part. I don't know if that's sufficient at this stage.
Mr Mackay?
Convener and members, the minute is in front of the core for approval for accuracy. So if there are any accuracy issues with the minute of Mr Mackenzie, could point that out?
No, I'm quite happy with the accuracy.
Well, in that case, that is all we have before us today in terms of the minutes of both sets of meeting. So that is for approval.
So at no point can I raise the question of suspension of standing orders to query this or to move against this.
Convener, no. The minute is in front of the core for approval for accuracy.
And it's not open for debate, given where we are currently.
It's not open for debate. Okay, no. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Moving on to item 2, declarations of interest. And you are invited to declare an interest in any agenda item at this point. If you become aware of an interest during the meeting, then I would ask that you declare that at that particular time. When declaring an interest, it would be helpful if members could indicate briefly the nature of that interest, and this helps to make our decision making more open and transparent to the public. And I'm seeing Councillor Donald Crichton's hand, and I think Councillor Mackenzie, or is that a legacy hand? Councillor Crichton first.
Thank you, Convener. I'm declaring an interest in item 4 as a member of the Stornoway Trust. Thank you. And I will leave the meeting during that item.
Thank you, Mr. Crichton. Any other declarations of interest? I'm seeing a CM. I can't see who that is.
That's me, Convener Leader. I'll also declare an interest in item 4 and withdraw from the meeting for that item. Thank you.
That's Councillor Roddy Mackay. Mr. Callum MacLean.
Yes, Chair, I declare an interest. I, like Councillor Crichton, I'm a member on the Stornoway Trust, but I'm also unqualified for it because I haven't passed the due certificate for that meeting. So on 2 counts, I think that would make me illegible for that meeting.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. McLean. I'm seeing another hand there somewhere. Don't know whose it is yet. I'm just scrolling up. Councillor Nicholson, I think it is. Is it, Councillor Nicholson?
Thank you, Convener. In regards to agenda item 4, I have to declare an interest there as also a member of the Stornoway Trust.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholson. Any other declarations of interest? Councillor Ray Mackenzie?
Yeah, I for the same reason, I am unable to take part in that item. Convener, thank you.
Is that item?
I'm not a member of Stornoway Trust, but because I haven't got the training, I'm not on the committee.
Chair, I can just clarify, members don't need to declare an interest when they haven't taken the training. Only members who have undertaken planning training can participate in item 4.
Okay, thank you.
You don't need to declare that as an interest.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, did I see Councillor Angus Morrison's hand up?
That may have been for the same reason, Convener.
Okay, thanks. So is everybody quite clear about that? Even if you haven't done the training for the planning, you can still participate in.
Well, members could ask questions. They cannot participate in the decision. No. They cannot propose or second an amendment. They cannot vote.
You can ask questions of the planning officers, but you will not be able to vote.
Participate in the decision.
Participate in the decision. Okay. Any other declarations? No, I'm not seeing any other declarations. Can we move on then to item 3, written questions to the convener and chairman of committees. The following written question has been submitted by Councillor John Orman MacLeod, and it goes as follows. Does the convener share mine and the concerns of other members of the sparse representation at a political level at Cornhill and Shear to the Scottish Parliament's cross-party group on crofting during this term? And my response to that is representation at officer level has continued to be fairly regular throughout this parliamentary session. However, attendance in person was scaled back over the last 2 years due to the cuts in travel budgets. Other representations on the Scottish Government crofting related bodies has taken place with the Chair of Sustainable Development Committee participating in the crofting stakeholder group and officers participating in the crofting bill group. Both these groups are currently in abeyance but are likely to be resurrected in the new parliamentary session. If there is a commitment to continue with the proposed crofting reform legislation. Due to Brexit, there was no time to complete legislation in the current parliamentary session, and the bill team in the Scottish Government was disbanded for the time being. The Chief Executive attended the last meeting of the cross-party group on the 26th of January 2021 to contribute to the discussion on the issue of croft assets in relation to financial assessment for care charges. Are you content with that, Councillor MacLeod? Do you want to ask a supplementary?
No, I don't want to ask a supplementary. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor MacLeod. We also have a number of written questions, and I'll just go through them again, and we'll come to them at the end, if that's okay, the end of this particular segment. The following written questions have been submitted by Councillor Callum MacLean. Question 1. When 8 members request a special meeting, why is it the case that this written request, worded as a motion, is then termed as an amendment for this special meeting? And my response to that is, when a request for a special meeting is submitted, the relevant officer will produce a report in respect of the subject matter of the request. Standing Order 39 provides that the recommendations contained in our report shall be taken as the motion, provided that these recommendations are moved and seconded. I'll maybe ask Mr. McLean, do you want to respond to that, or do you have a further supplementary on that particular question?
No, thanks, Chair. That clears that one up.
Thank you very much. Move on.
Just to clarify the point, when a member submits a series of questions on the same subject which are taken as one question, they're only allowed one supplementary, not a supplementary for every question.
Right, okay, thanks for that clarification. And are you okay with that, Mr. McLean? You only get one supplementary across the 6 questions. And you can pick and choose which, if any, you want to pursue. Question 2. When this amendment and signed by the requisite number of members is submitted, a special meeting has to be called within 14 days. Why is this written amendment not distributed to all members so that these members can have sight of the wording before and during debate? The response to that question is, amendments are circulated following agreement with the proposer and seconder. Members may also circulate their amendment directly. Do you have a supplementary on that, Mr. McLean?
Yes, yes, convener.
Yes, carry on.
Yeah, sorry. When that agreement is made for the amendment, that can be as little as 2 minutes notice, or not even notice before the meeting. How then can members get that distributed to them?
I think the normal way of distributing that, I think the first part of the response is that the amendments are circulated following agreement of the proposer and seconder, and that doesn't necessarily happen on every occasion, and that's why maybe sometimes members don't get notified because they haven't got the consent of the proposer and seconder, but members may also circulate their amendment directly as well, and that is the response. Okay.
Well, my question is still the same. There has not been enough time to circulate the agreed amendment to members.
Any amendment that is proposed has to be notified before midday of the actual meeting or the full quorum. So there is at least in most cases a 24-hour period in which case that can be notified by email or by any other source.
I'm talking about the competency of the amendment.
I think we're probably going to come to competency of amendments further on. Okay. So we move on then to question 3. And question 3 is, who is responsible for determining that the amendment wording is competent? The response to that is, this is detailed in Standing Order 13. The Chair will decide on all matters of order, points of order, competence and relevance arising at the CORLA, committee or subcommittee meetings. The Chair's decision is final on all matters. The Chair takes advice from the Chief Executive and from the Governance and Elections Manager prior to responding to that. So, in a nutshell, Standing Order 13 is what governs the determining of an amendment being competent or not. Do you have any further questions on that?
I don't think I'm allowed one. I've used up my supplementaries.
Okay, all right. Thank you. But in respect of that, I think it behoves all of us. These are fairly basic but very important parts of our decision-making process, and the standing orders are what dictates how meetings and debates are conducted, and it would be useful for all of us from time to time to to ensure that we're au fait with what the standing orders are, because these are the rules by which the COLA makes its decisions. Question 4. When the competency of the amendment is challenged, is notice given to all those who signed the request for the special meeting? And the response to that is, the competency of an amendment is always for the chair to determine, and their decision is final. Members are asked to discuss amendments with officers in advance so that the matters of competency can be addressed appropriately. And again, I'll move to question 5. Question 5, how much prior notice to the meeting is provided when the competency of the wording is challenged? And the response is, the final ruling in respect of competency is given by the chair at the meeting. The chair's decision is final. Members are asked to discuss amendments with officers in advance so that matters of competency can be addressed appropriately. Question 6. After an amendment is deemed incompetent, is there sufficient notice given to enable the agreement of a competent revised wording for the amendment? The final ruling in respect of competency is given by the chair at the meeting. The chair's decision is final. Members are asked to discuss amendments with officers in advance so that matters of competency can be addressed. As a general point, like I said previously, I would indicate that the above questions relate to governance matters and are covered in our standing orders. It is incumbent on elected members to familiarise themselves with the standing orders as they regulate how our decision-making structure operates. Clarification on specific aspects of the standing orders can be sought from the Democratic Services team. And I think that concludes all the questions. I'm seeing a hand up there, Angus.
Yes, convener. Thank you for letting me speak. I just wanted to support you in what you have had to say about Standing Order 13. Standing Order 13 is possibly one of the most important standing orders that we have, and it would be incumbent, as you have just suggested, that all members should familiarise themselves with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cormack. Can we move on to item 4, which is the section 36 application for Stornoway Wind Farm? And I think we now have to go through a process where people who have declared an interest will...
Yeah, those who've declared the interest should now leave the meeting, and Marina McCauley, who's monitoring, will check that and we'll invite them back in once the item has concluded.
Okay, so can you switch off your microphones and your video, and Marina will check that all those who have declared an interest have left the meeting, and we will call you back once the item has been completed. So that's going to take a couple of minutes, presumably. As people are leaving the meeting, and I'll just we'll check on that once I've finished the notes with regard to this application, and I'll just go through that just to save time. Pursuant to the Corus Scheme of Administration, as this planning application is classed as a major application under the hierarchy of development regulations, it must be determined by the CORLA following consideration by the Planning Applications Board. The board recommended that the application be approved at its meeting of the 2nd of February 2021, and the minute of this meeting has been added to Dropbox. As the CORLA does not consider such applications on a regular basis, I would remind members of our agreed process for determining such applications, and also that you must have taken part in planning training to participate in the decision. And this means that the Comhairle is acting in a quasi-judicial manner with this application. Any amendment contrary to officer recommendations moved by a member must be based on planning reasons. If such an amendment is proposed, then the chair may choose to adjourn the meeting pursuant to the timeout protocol. Members are reminded that a decision which is not based on legitimate planning reasons would leave the Comhairle exposed to the risk of legal challenge and potentially significant costs arising therefrom. I'm going to ask Morag Ferguson to speak to the report, and she will give us the presentation and thereafter answer any questions. And can I reiterate that this is about asking questions and not making statements, because we will have to revert back to the planning officers with that. Are we happy that everybody who said they were going to leave have left? Yes, thank you, Derek. Can I pass over to Morag then for the presentation, and then we will take questions afterwards and then come to recommendations. Morag?
Okay, thank you, Convener. Good evening, members. I appreciate that many members were present at the planning board yesterday, but for the benefit of all members of the Comhairle, ahead of consideration of the report before you, I think it's helpful to provide an overview of the Section 36 consenting process, since it's some time that since such an application under this procedure has come before the Comhairle. Members will be aware that all wind farm generating stations that exceed a capacity of 50 megawatts in output are required to apply for a development consent under the terms of Section 36 of the Electricity Act 1989. Such applications fall to be determined by the Scottish Ministers. Further, any application under Section 36 of the Electricity Act for consent to construct a generating station is subject to the Electricity Works Environmental Impact Assessment Scotland Regulations 2017. These regulations set out the consultation procedures. Section 36 consenting procedure for land-based wind farms is administered on behalf of Scottish Ministers by the Energy Consents Unit of Scottish Government. The Electricity Act places certain duties upon the applicant in relation to impacts upon the environment arising from the development. And the purpose of environmental impact assessment is to explore those impacts, their interrelationships and mitigations, and demonstrate how the duties set out in the Act can be met by the developer. The Planning Authority is consulted on the Environmental Impact Assessment Report, which has been prepared by the developer and submitted as part of the process for application for a consent under Section 36. The basis of the Planning Authority's assessment to inform the view it will provide to ministers is the examination of the EIA report. That's supported by the specialist advice that's received from consultation bodies such as SEPA, SNH and Historic Environment Scotland. These are all considered together with the Comhairle Zone Development Plan, which is a significant material consideration, and also national energy and planning policies. That assessment exercise allows the positive benefits of the proposed development to be considered alongside the negative impacts or harms of the development, and ultimately to be weighed up in arriving at an overall planning balance. Environmental and planning issues therefore inform the view that the Planning Authority will provide to ministers. If the Planning Authority, having considered and weighed up all the planning and environmental matters, finds cause to submit an objection to the Section 36 application on particular grounds, and that objection is not subsequently withdrawn by them, then Scottish ministers must hold a public inquiry to examine the particular issues of concern. Where the Planning Authority has not submitted an objection to the application or has withdrawn its objection, there is no obligation on ministers to hold a public local inquiry. When other parties submit an objection, Scottish ministers must consider those objections together with all other material considerations and at their discretion decide whether or not to hold a public local inquiry. That's the process that's relevant to the Section 36 application, which is before the Corla today. I will now bring through on screen share a presentation which relates to the report. And if I can just get confirmation that the first slide has appeared on the screen.
It certainly has here. Hopefully,
Yes, it has here.
iPads have got the same.
Okay, thank you, members. Okay, turning to the report before members for decision today. This relates to a consultation by Scottish ministers on an application made to them for consent to construct a wind farm generating station on land to the west of Stornoway. The application is made under Section 36 of the Electricity Act. It's supported by an EIA report. There's also a concurrent request by the developer for a deemed planning permission, which ministers may also grant under the powers of the Act. The application by Lewis Wind Power Limited is for a large-scale wind farm, and the EIA report sets out the range of interrelated issues that fall to be considered. The committee report is therefore of necessity lengthy, and this presentation, which will only highlight the key matters, will take about 35 minutes. The Section 36 application, supported by the initial environmental impact assessment, was notified to the Corla and consulted upon in May 2019. Thereafter, in order to address concerns or queries that arose through that initial consultation process, it was supported by two subsequent submissions of environmental information, the first of these in March 2020 and the second one in November 2020. At each of these three stages, the environmental information was advertised in the local and national press, inviting public input to the information on the development proposal, and it was also subject to a round of consultation with statutory consultees and a wide range of non-statutory consultees. The advice of consultees is set out in the committee report. Since the report was written and published, additional responses have been received from the Civil Aviation Authority and from the RSPB. These are not included within the report, but will be referred to in a slide later within the presentation for completeness. The committee report before you sets out the assessment of the environmental and planning issues, and having weighed up the benefits against the negative issues, concludes with a recommendation as to a Corla view for submission to Scottish ministers. My colleague Anne Napier, who has led the assessment work on the case, will take you through the next part of the presentation, and I'll now pass you over to Anne.
Thank you, Morag. Good evening, convener and members. In terms of structure, the presentation will set out some of the details of the development proposed, then look at some key visualisations of the scheme, before focusing on the principle of development, the key benefits of the scheme, potential significant harms and the mitigation measures proposed, before coming to the overall view and recommendation. The application seeks consent for the erection of up to 35 turbines on land west of Stornoway. The site is some 1,700 hectares in size, although the wind farm infrastructure would only occupy a small part of the overall development site. The slide before you shows the extent of the site in relation to the north of Lewis. The next slide shows the application site in more detail, with the town of Stornoway to the east on the right-hand side of the slide. The site has two proposed access points from the A859, one to the north and one further to the south, and the Pentland Road crosses the site from west to east. The site has a previous and existing Section 36 consent for 36 turbines. This slide provides a comparison of the layout between the previously consented development and the current proposal, as it was originally submitted in 2019. The consented scheme is in blue and the current proposal is shown in black. As members will be able to see, the locations of the proposed turbines are broadly similar to those previously consented, with the exception of the northwest corner of the site. As can also be seen from this comparison slide, the proposal to now construct turbines in the northwest corner has enabled the development to be moved slightly further away from the eastern site boundary and the properties in Newmarket and the Upper New Valley. In addition to the Section 36 consent for 36 turbines, planning permission was granted in May last year for a single turbine at Ben Hullavai. This planning permission forms part of the planning history of the site. The site for this single turbine is in broadly the same area as turbine 25 of the current proposal, as can be seen from this slide. It is not uncommon for two alternative schemes to be granted permission, and it's recognised that it would not be feasible to erect both these turbines given their close proximity. The decision on how to proceed with the delivery of a turbine in this location is a matter for agreement between the parties holding the respective consents, and such agreements would primarily be related to land interest and commercial matters. Since the report was published, the community developer of the Ben Hullavai turbine has engaged with the caller, indicating a wish to re-engage Lewis Wind Power in discussion, and in turn, Lewis Wind Power has confirmed a willingness to consider how the delivery of a mutually acceptable development in this area of the site could proceed. On that basis, a suggested additional point has been added to the recommended view, and this will be addressed at the end of the presentation. It's anticipated that the originally submitted 35 turbine development would have a capacity of about 196 megawatts, which would be an increase of about 16 megawatts over the existing consented Section 36 development. This slide shows the most recent layout, with a potential revision to a 33 turbine scheme. If, as recommended, this 33 turbine scheme is consented, the capacity of the proposed development would be expected to be revised to just under 185 megawatts. The existing Section 36 consent is for a development of 36 turbines, all of 145 metres high. The single Ben Hullavai turbine would be up to 150 metres high. The current application proposes two heights of turbine. Up to 25 turbines would be 180 metres high, and up to 10 turbines would be 156 metres. The shorter turbines would be located to the east of the site, closest to Stornoway. And this slide shows a typical elevation of the shorter turbines. The next slide shows a typical elevation of the taller 180 metre high turbine. It's envisaged that the turbines would be painted in light grey with a semi-matte finish to minimise visual intrusion. As the turbine used is a candidate or typical example, and the model is yet to be finalised, it is recommended that the overall height and colour of the turbines be controlled by condition. As well as the turbines themselves, a significant amount of associated development and infrastructure would be required to support the proposal. Each turbine would require the construction of an area of hard standing for the crane pad. Almost 29 kilometres of access track is proposed as part of the 35 turbine scheme, with several new watercourse crossings. Up to 5 borrow pits are proposed within the site to provide the estimated amount of rock that would be required. The avoidance of peat loss and disturbance would not be possible as nearly all the site comprises blanket bog and wet heath habitat. However, the revised scheme would result in a 41% reduction in the amount of peat loss and disturbance compared to the consented scheme, which is a saving sought and supported by local and national planning policy. This slide provides indicative details of the proposed substation and its related compound area. And I'll now hand you back to Morag, who'll take you through some of the key visualizations of the scheme.
Convener, Kenny John, I wonder if I could request if it's possible to maximise the view from the desktop, as it's a struggle really to make out meaningfully what is in the presentation. But if it can be maximised to full screen, it might be slightly improved.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll ask Morag if she can do that, and that would be helpful.
Convener, I'll do that after I present the visualizations. The reason we've left it in this view is that it allows you to zoom in on the visualizations. It won't allow you to do that in full screen mode. So once we complete the visualizations, I'll then revert to full screen mode.
Okay, thanks for that, Morag. Are you okay with that, Councillor MacLeod?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the technical limitations if you go to full screen, so thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Carry on, Morag.
Okay, thank you. Before taking members through some of the main issues in the report, we'll review some of the key visualisations in order to appreciate the scale and likely visual impact of the wind farm on the area. A large number of visualisations have been provided within the environmental report, and these are available on the Corless public access portal. The views listed in this slide, in this presentation, have been selected to represent the likely visual impact from important locations around the site, as well as views from some of the local road network. Viewpoints 2, 24, 25 and 4 are all viewpoints that are from elevated points round about the site, from areas that will be known to members. And viewpoints 7, 3, 26 and 1 are from the approaches towards the wind farm on particular roads. So if I take you to the first slide, this slide is the probably the position from which the wind farm will be most visible. The site of the Lewis War Memorial will be known to all members. Each slide, visualization slide, is set out in the same way. At the top of the slide, there is like a baseline photograph. This is a panoramic photograph of the site, as it would have been when the image was generated, probably in early 2019, probably fairly similar to what it is now. Below that is what is termed a wireframe, and it's almost like a pencil drawing, computer-generated drawing of each of the turbines. That wireframe is termed like a bare land. It's a bare land computer-generated model, and what that means is that it doesn't actually show any parts where the turbines could be obscured by vegetation or by buildings. So it's like a bare earth model, and then below that is a superimposed version of the turbine images at their scale on the baseline photograph above. So if I just take members through, first of all, the wireline, what you have here is to the right of the screen, and I'll maybe just here what you have is the 6 Pentfield Road wind turbines and the 3 Pencratick turbines sitting behind the Stornoway Wind Farm turbines. And then if I come to the visualisation below, the full range of turbines will be visible on the horizon, towers generators and blades. So again, if I just zoom in on that visualization, if I go too far, these are the wind turbines for scale. The 6 Pentland Road wind turbines are here, and the 3 Pincraigic ones are here. And then the telecommunications towers that are over near the council's salt depot are on here. This next visualization is from Upper New Valley. Let's go take this back to 100%. So in the first image here, it just shows the position, and using the wireframe, which is absent of buildings and vegetation, Pentland Road wind turbines aren't visible in that, but tips and some hubs would be visible off the wind farm. From that particular point, when you actually view it, in practice, the turbines that are in this area would not be visible because of the buildings, and what you would see is some of the lower ones. Again, the telecoms tower here. This next visualization is from the next village where the turbines will be most visible, at Newmarket. Again, in this visualization, just using the wireframe again, the Pentland Road wind turbines, you're looking end onto them, so they're stacked here, and the 3 Pincraigic ones are here. And when you take that onto the visualization itself, you can see the Pentland ones here and the Pincraigic ones here. And again, in that visualization, most of the wind farm is going to be visible on the horizon. And this next image is the final of the elevated images, and it's taken at Gallows Hill, one of the most elevated points in the castle grounds. That viewpoint has 360-degree view across the town, the harbour, and across the moor to the west. And from this view, again, like all the turbines will be visible, both towers, hubs and blades. And again, in this particular view, what you would see is the Pentland Road wind turbines here in the background. And again, in the visualization, the Pincraigic ones in the centre here. And I think that'll be the Creed Enterprise turbine here on its own to the side. Again, like I'll just zoom in on that visualization. And take members just across, like the full panorama of the site. Having been to that viewpoint, you do tend to be drawn towards the view of the harbour rather than across the moor. And now to the next visualizations, which are key viewpoint down into Blackwater. It's possibly not very clear, but this gives you an idea of just where it is on the moor. At this point, you're going to be looking more onto the end of the wind farm. And so what you will see in a line here is you would see the 6 Pentland Road wind turbines in a line. And you'll be looking onto the end of the wind farm with the Pincraigic turbines behind, and then over to the left here would be the 3 Arnish Moor turbines and the Creed Enterprise Park turbine to the far left. So some of the turbines would be bunched up over one another, and you would see it in that view. Then heading south to the next viewpoint, this is as you're coming up from Harris towards Stornoway, and it's on the A859 just north of Luripost. Again, on this image, It's the junction here at Luripost, and the viewpoint is taken here just before you head into the town of Stornoway. It's looking onto the south end of the wind farm. I appreciate that this visualisation does actually have quite a lot of clutter in it because of the 2 high voltage lines and because of the time of day it was taken at. The fence posts are actually quite prevalent. But in this view, you would see the Pentland Road wind turbines behind the development, and possibly the Bencraicheck ones lost somewhat in there as well. When you zoom in on the view, you're again seeing the turbines, one behind the other, with the Pentland Road ones in the background here. It's not the best visualisations, but it is indicative of the south approach to the site. Then this viewpoint here is from Oliver's Brae, and it is representative of the view as you approach Stornoway, coming in from the airport and coming in from Point, and also like how you would view the wind turbine in the context of that view of the castle grounds and the garden and designed landscape. So what you have like on the horizon there is like the trees in the castle grounds, the Pentland Road wind turbines, albeit visible on the wireframe, and the Bencraicheck ones here in reality are probably obscured by the trees. But the Stornoway wind farm, because of their height, will actually be visible on the horizon above the castle grounds. And I think for scale, I think you can see the War Memorial over here. And I'll just take members across that slide. And then this final visualisation, it's a walking route, but it's also a driving route. It's taken on the Pentland Road. It's also part of the Hebridean Way. And it's as you're coming across from the Carloway direction heading into Stornoway. These are the 180 metre turbines, which are furthest west on the scheme. So they're the ones that are furthest away from the town. Again, in this image, the Pentland Road wind turbines are to the other side, to your left, and the Bencraicheck turbines are in the middle of the development here. So again, if I just take members in on that visualisation, as I said, Pentland Road wind turbines out here in a line, and looking onto the other side of the wind turbine with the town in the distance over to the west. So members, what I will do now is I'll pass you back over to Anne, who's going to take you through the next stage of the presentation.
Thank you, Morag, and hopefully members will have been able to see those slides clearly, but also asked to remind you that I believe the presentation is also available to you in your Dropbox, if that makes things any easier. So I'll now turn to look at the policy context for the proposal and also the principle of the development. The committee report outlines the requirements of the Electricity Act, the National Planning Framework, the National Scottish Planning Policy, the Outer Hebrides Local Development Plan, and the caller's supplementary guidance on wind energy development. In relation to the Local Development Plan Policy DS1, the site is located partly within an area identified as Outwith Settlement and partly within a defined remote area. These areas allow, in principle, development for renewable energy, subject to certain criteria being met. The supplementary guidance includes the wind energy spatial strategy. This indicates that the entire application site is within an area of constraint, where wind farms may be appropriate in some circumstances. There are strong and consistent national and local planning and other policies in support of onshore wind development. In terms of spatial strategy, the location of the proposed wind farm is considered to accord with Policy DS1, subject to detailed assessment of compliance with the provisions of the supplementary guidance. The principle of this type of development in this location has previously been considered to be acceptable, and that consent is existing. Since that decision, there has been a change in the development plan. However, there are considered to have been no significant changes in circumstances that would materially alter the previous position in relation to the spatial strategy and the principle of development. The application was submitted with a comprehensive environmental report, which considered potential impacts of the proposed development in relation to particular topics. The committee report that is before members today follows a similar approach. On an issue-by-issue basis, the committee report considers the policy context, summarises the consideration undertaken by the environmental report, and provides an assessment of the issue overall, drawing on the responses by specialist consultees. To summarise the committee report, there would be important positive benefits likely to result to the local economy, both in terms of overall investment and job creation. These would be particularly significant locally during the construction phase of the project, but there are also likely to be benefits during the operational and decommissioning phases. Secondly, the proposal would make a strong positive contribution towards supporting the case for the radial connector, as it would help to ensure that a solid needs case is in place. The report considers that considerable weight should be given to these benefits. As a result of the overall scale and predicted capacity of the proposal, it would make a significant contribution to the delivery of renewable energy production and consumption. It would also make a positive contribution to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and would result in a significant total carbon saving. Given the strong national and local policy support in these regards, these are considered to be significant benefits of the scheme, to which substantial weight should be given. The scheme would also improve public access to the site, which would have significant benefits for community amenity and recreation. These benefits are considered to carry moderate weight in favour of the proposal. The assessment found certain issues arising from the proposal are likely to be neutral in their overall effect. For the reasons set out within the committee report, it is considered that the proposal would be unlikely to be harmful to tourism. The creation of 5 borrow pits on the site, rather than the use of existing local quarries, would result in significant peat loss and disturbance, and would result in the loss of a potential revenue for local businesses. However, these borrow pits are considered to be justified, as they would meet an identified need to secure a timely and adequate supply of aggregate, and would have significant cost benefits to the developer. Given the nature of the application site, the avoidance of peat disturbance would not be feasible. However, subject to the amended site layout plan and the application of appropriate conditions, it has been satisfactorily demonstrated that the proposed development as amended would minimise disturbance of peat and avoid areas of deepest peat. The application submissions also identify the potential for small carbon gains due to the reinstatement of peat within borrow pits and improvement in peat quality elsewhere, including through the implementation of a finalised habitat management plan. Subject to the application of appropriate conditions and mitigation, the proposal would not be likely to result in harmful impacts on noise, shadow flicker, electromagnetic interference, aviation, telecommunication, broadcasting, and defence. Detrimental impacts on the water environment have been minimised, and the impact of the proposal on roads and traffic would be acceptable, subject to suitable mitigation. However, the absence of harm is a neutral factor, which weighs neither for nor against the proposal. In terms of negative impacts, there would be significant adverse visual impacts to some local residential occupiers. Considered overall, whilst significant, these would not be unacceptably harmful to their living conditions. In terms of landscape and visual impacts, the proposal would have significant adverse effects on the appreciation of Stornoway and its landscape setting, including from the sea. It would also result in widespread significant adverse effects on views within about 14 kilometres of the development, and significant adverse effects in relation to nighttime lighting within approximately 10 kilometres of the site. The proposal would not maintain the overall integrity of landscape character, and it would not relate positively to the specific landscape and visual characteristics of the local area. Due to the scale and number of turbines proposed, the scheme would have an unacceptable significant visual and landscape impact on the character of the Outer Hebrides. As such, it would not meet the requirements of the local development plan or the supplementary guidance in this regard. It is considered that considerable weight should be given to this adverse impact. The proposal would have a significant adverse effect on the setting of the Lewis Wall Memorial and would result in a significant change to the perception and appreciation of the historic setting of the Stornoway Conservation Area and the Lewis Castle and Lady Lever Park garden and design landscape. It is considered that this harmful impact should also carry considerable weight against the proposal. In relation to ecology, it's considered that some potential adverse impacts could be adequately addressed by appropriate mitigation, such as replacement tree planting and otter mitigation measures, which could be secured by condition. Some significant adverse effects are likely to occur, particularly to blanket bog and wet heath habitats, and these impacts are given considerable weight. However, these impacts could be reduced by embedded design mitigation measures and the use of careful control measures during the construction phase of the development. It is concluded that a revised 33 turbine scheme would not have an adverse effect on the integrity of nearby Natura sites, which reflects the views of NatureScot. However, considerable weight is given to the potentially significant adverse effects that may result to some bird species, including hen harrier. Since the report was drafted, further comments have been received from the RSPB in this respect. Strong concerns continue to be maintained by them. These consider that there would be a significant impact on the recently established important hen harrier population in Lewis. It is predicted that this population would be 19% lower in 25 years' time due to collision risk impacts than it would be without the wind farm. The RSPB also considers that development activity should be avoided within the recommended disturbance-free distances around hen harrier and red-throated diver nest sites. A number of turbines are proposed at less than half the recommended distances. As a result of these impacts, the RSPB continue to advise that further turbines need to be removed. The RSPB also considers that details of measures to avoid disturbance through access and recreation should be provided at this stage rather than conditioned. These continued strong concerns have been carefully considered. However, they do not alter the overall assessment of the proposal as set out within the committee report. Recent comments received from the Civil Aviation Authority highlight the need for the provision of adequate lighting and align with those of HIAL in this respect. As a result, the nighttime lighting impacts would be broadly similar to those of the consented scheme. When the positive benefits and negative impacts are considered overall, it is concluded that the considerable weight given to the harmful effects, including those on landscape and visual impacts, the setting of heritage assets on blanket bog and wet heath habitat and on birds, including nationally important species, would be clearly outweighed by the greater substantial and considerable weight given to the positive benefits of the scheme to renewable energy generation, climate change and carbon emissions, the local economy and employment, and the moderate weight given to public access and recreation benefits. Consequently, the report concludes that the identified conflict with the supplementary guidance and the Outer Hebrides Local Development Plan policies NBH1, NBH2 and NBH6 in these regards would be outweighed by the particular benefits of the development proposed, which would be sufficient to justify support for the proposal overall. It is also recognised that the landscape and visual impact of the proposal and its effect on the setting of heritage assets would not be materially different to that of the previously consented scheme. Subject to the application of appropriate conditions, suitable mitigation and compensation, and in light of the revised layout and the removal of 2 turbines, many of the other impacts of the amended current proposal would be similar to, or not materially worse than, the previously consented scheme. And in comparison with the consented development, the 5 borough pits currently proposed would be fewer than those approved previously, and the likely impacts of the proposal on the loss and disturbance of peat would be significantly reduced. In this respect, the current proposal would be clearly preferable to that of the existing consented fallback development, which is a matter that also weighs in favour of the current scheme. And I'll now pass you back to Morag to conclude the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Members, ahead of the recommendation, I'll take you through the terms of the recommended view, which has been set out in section 14.2 of the committee report, and to that, added in blue, is a further matter which was referred to earlier in the slide where we talked about the Ben Hullavai turbine. There are a number of points to the proposed core review which are summarised in this slide. I appreciate members can read, but for the benefit of the tape, I will just read briefly through the slide. The summary of the recommended core review to be submitted to Scottish Ministers is as follows. The importance of the proposal in delivering the radio connected infrastructure and meeting renewable energy targets. The principle of development has previously been considered to be acceptable. The Corla is supportive of the development in principle. Some objections and concerns have been addressed since submission and are addressed in conditions. 2 turbines, turbine 24 and 34, merit exclusion from the development on ornithological grounds. That's in line with the advice of Nature.Scot. The layout of the development should reflect that submitted on the amended site layout, this being the layout that minimises the impact on peat loss and disturbance. Further, that the Corla support is subject to the removal of the aviation objections, the application of appropriate conditions on the Section 36 consent, including in respect of the Met Office radon mitigation measures and the application of a suite of suggested planning conditions, and the completion of a planning obligation between the developer and other interests before a consent is issued by Scottish Ministers. In addition to that, since the recommendation of the Planning Board, this additional point has been added following approach by the community developer of the Ben Hullavai turbine and communication from Lewis Wind Power, the applicant. And that point is that the commitment of the developer to engage with the Corla and the community interest over the delivery options for turbine 25, given the extant consent for a community turbine in that location. And finally, that there's no public interest in holding a public local inquiry and that an early decision by Scottish Ministers is in the wider public interest. By way of explanation, if the scheme is granted consent under Section 36 of the Electricity Act by Scottish Ministers, a deemed planning permission would also be granted by them. Appendix 5 to the report includes the detailed wording of the planning conditions that are suggested should form part of any deemed planning permission. In addition, Appendix 5 also refers to the need for a Section 75 planning obligation or legal agreement and sets out the various matters that would need to be covered within it. And then, members, I just take you to the final slide. The recommendation that is set out in paragraph 3.1 of the committee report is set out here for ease of reference. In summary, it's recommended that the views set out in paragraph 4.2 of the committee report, and which I've summarised on the previous slide, be submitted to Scottish ministers. It's also recommended that delegated authority be given to the Head of Economic Development and Planning to engage with the Scottish Government, the Energy Consents Unit, the developer and statutory consultees regarding any technical, or other issues raised. Such Scottish ministers be minded to approve the application that delegated authority be given to the Head of Economic Development Planning to reach agreement on the detail of planning conditions and to the Chief Executive to complete a planning obligation agreement. And finally, that Scottish ministers be informed that there's no public interest in holding a public inquiry for the Stornoway wind farm application. That concludes the presentation. The issues presented are addressed in detail within the committee report, and we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Convener.
I was on mute there, apparently. Thank you very much to both Morag and Anne for that comprehensive presentation that we've just had. And as Morag said, we're quite happy for members to ask questions, provided they are material to planning issues. And Morag and Anne and potentially Alan MacDonald, solicitor, might contribute to that as well. I'm seeing one hand up, Councillor Roddy Mackay, a question for the officer.
Hi, the minute of the planning application board yesterday, it has me down as present. I wasn't actually there. I'd actually given apologies for that meeting. So just to correct the minute.
Okay, thank you for that. Correction, Derek Mackay will take note of that. Councillor Ray Mackenzie and then Councillor Cal Macmillan.
Thank you, Convener. I want my camera on. There we are. Yeah, I know that I can't take part in the decision on that, but and I don't have any connection with any wind farms or anything. But I have been contacted by many bodies and individuals, but the local community councils, grazing committees, who represent many people locally. So I suppose I can ask questions on this. I'm sure that many of the objections that have more than one reason to object, objectors have more than one reason to object, whether it's aesthetic, because of the size of the wind farm, or due to the small return to the local community. And I know that doesn't really come into this, but I do agree that there's many possible good points for employment, etc. But this is not necessarily quantified. I know figures have ranged from 50 long term to 180 or whatever. Undoubtedly, there's also long term losses, which I'm not able to talk about tonight. But I think Anne and Morag certainly covered these points. I would question this matter of that there is no public interest in holding a local public inquiry, and I question that because of the amount of community councils and grazing committees locally that have objected to this.
Okay.
My other question is basically why can they not have a local planning inquiry? If this council doesn't agree with that, what's their alternative? Where do they go from there? Thank you.
Councillor Mackenzie, I don't know if Morag or Anne can respond to these two specific questions.
Convener, a public local inquiry would be set up where the local authority maintained an objection on specific planning or environmental grounds, for example, and the purpose of it, the inquiry would be to examine these particular matters, under, cross-examination. The assessment has not found that there are, that there are particular grounds of objection such that the council's view is one in objection, and therefore it would follow that if the council is not maintaining an objection, that it would not then be seeking a public local inquiry.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Morag. Councillor Cal Macmillan. Councillor Cal Macmillan.
Thank you, Convener. I'm going to leave my camera off just to keep the bandwidth as much as possible. My question and query is regarding Turbine 25 to see if it's materially changed from the Planning Applications Board of yesterday, or if that is still per item 3.1d as before. It's just to see if it was exactly the same as yesterday, or if there's been a material change in the application.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Macmillan. I'll ask Morag to respond, but she did allude to that near the end of her presentation. Morag?
Yeah, there is no change to there's absolutely no change to the proposal. What the community and developer have agreed is that they will re-engage in discussions over how a turbine could be delivered in that area of the site, and that's what's been included in the recommendation. But there is no change to the actual proposal.
Okay, thank you for that, Morag. I'm seeing Councillor Ushton Robertson, followed by Councillor Donald Manford.
Thank you, Convener. Just a question for Morag, and it's in relation to the aviation objections. I just wondered if the plans from Hyle to remote Stornoway Airport could present a difficulty.
Morag or Anne, can you respond?
And my understanding is, my recollection is that Hyle have not maintained an objection. And maybe you could correct me. I think it's.
No, that is correct. There's no objection from Hyle to the scheme as proposed.
And these discussions with Hyle have been fairly recent, have they?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Donald Manford, then Councillor Cal Macmillan.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. The question already raised in relation to asking about the public inquiry, the value of the public inquiry, and the opinion of the council, or the opinion given that there isn't an interest. I just want clarity on the explanation, please. I understood the explanation given by Morag was the interest has to be relevant to a planning issue. Is it the council's position that there isn't an interest, a public interest on issues relevant to planning? Just for clarity.
Morag, can you respond to that, or Anne?
I think it would be unfair to say that there isn't public interest in matters that are relevant to planning, but there is not an extant objection on matters that are considered necessary to be examined through a public inquiry. And in the absence of an objection by the planning authority, it follows that ministers are under no obligation to hold a public inquiry. However, when other parties submit an objection, Scottish ministers must consider those objections and all other material considerations, and ministers may at their discretion decide whether or not to hold a public local inquiry.
Okay, Councillor Manford, are you happy with that response?
Yes, I understand. I've got that, and that's it's a very good presentation for planning. But that still doesn't follow. That answer doesn't follow my understanding with the position put up by the Corlia that a public inquiry shouldn't be there because there is no public interest.
To respond further to that, Morag, I think the reality is there has been very little public interest shown in a local public inquiry over the past 18 months that this application has been. I don't know if Morag, if you want to intervene there.
Convener, the application was submitted to us in May, June 2019. And it was advertised in the press currently for two weeks, and then again in March 2020 and again in November 2020, both times for 2 weeks in 4 different publications, to my understanding. And we, as a planning authority, did not receive a single public representation from members of the public. And to my understanding, the Scottish Government Energy Consents Unit have not received any objections from members of the public either. Therefore, the outstanding objection that we have is that has been submitted by the RSPB, which officers have considered, and it was their conclusion that it didn't alter the planning balance overall. Therefore, it is on that basis that the recommendation is that there is no public interest in holding an inquiry, because there have been no formal submissions through the planning process.
Okay, thanks for that, Morag.
Thank you for that. That is much clearer.
Thank you.
At the time that the position was laid that there was no public interest, that is accurate. That's so as you advise. It seems clear from the from the messages going around just now that there is public interest, but in terms of the position as laid out by the planning department, there wasn't at the time. I acknowledge what you're saying.
Thank you, Councillor Manford. Councillor Cal Macmillan, and then Councillor Ray Mackenzie. Sorry, not Councillor Ray Mackenzie, Councillor Gordon Murray first, then Councillor Ray Mackenzie.
Thank you, Convener. On the basis that the recommendation has changed from yesterday to include a positive requirement to engage with, I think it was Agnish and Sordal concerning Turbine 25, would it be possible to extend that so that the requirement to consult is extended to the other grazings committees, so that each grazing might be able to include their turbine as part of this development in partnership or in association with the EDF Wood Group proposal before us. I'm thinking, I think it was Melbus and Pranahui, or North Street, Melbus and Pranahui, that were looking at something before, and we might even have seen something coming through in the Planning Applications Board. I would take that on advisement, but certainly there seems to be a lot of interest from grazings committees, and if we could devolve the, what you might call the trickle-down benefit to the crofting townships, so that they might develop income streams from rivers of wind, then that would be, in my view, a positive benefit for it. And it's something that, since we're doing it for Turbine 25 for Agnish and Sordal, might we be able to extend the derogation of the consent to the chief executive to deal with the other grazings committees in this area where their grazings are, and the developer. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you for that, Councillor McMillan, but in reality, the only thing we can deal with is what is currently before us. and there have been some. Clearly, there have been discussions between developers and grazing committees in the past, but we can only deal with the application that is before us just now. And I'll ask Morag if she can, if she's got a response for your question, Mr. McLaren. Morag.
Thank you, Convener. The situation with Knock and Sordale and the Stirling Wind Farm is that there has been like a historic agreement to work together with to deliver a turbine in that area in conjunction with the Stirling Wind Farm. So their turbine was always conditioned to be delivered in conjunction with, because they have relied on the Stirling Wind Farm environmental statement and on the radar mitigation solution. So this is what they're really looking is to re-engage in that in relation to the current scheme, in relation to the scheme that's before you. There has been previous discussions in relation to the consented scheme. So it is really just a marker that they wish to re-engage discussions, and the developer has confirmed to us in writing that they are willing to do that. So really it's going to be up to the two parties how they bring that forward, but there is precedent for for that particular developer.
Okay, thank you for that, Morag. Councillor Gordon Murray, Councillor Ray Mackenzie and Councillor Norrie MacDonald. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Convener. I just first of all want to welcome Councillor McMillan's point on discussions with other grazing committees. I want to correct something I said at the planning board yesterday when I mentioned the public inquiry would take days or weeks. I've rechecked that, and I think that's the collation of data, but the actual from start of public inquiry to decision could take far longer than that. I've had information that I believe the Scottish Government is going to consult with community councils on this, and if the public wish to make representations, it would be they would be encouraged to go through the Stornoway Community Councils in this instance. So I just want to make these points. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie and then Councillor Norrie MacDonald.
Thank you, Convener, again. I should have thanked Morag and Anne for the very difficult presentation under the present circumstances, because it's hard enough when you're doing it in the chamber, but when you're having to do it through Zoom or Teams, it's very difficult indeed. Do I understand from what was said then, and I should mention what Gordon Murray has just said, that we're talking about Stornoway Council, but also Sandwich Council, and I'm not aware of Laxdale Community Council may also be in the same position, but they do not have turbines, and so it's not necessarily just the people that have turbines that wish to negotiate or talk about this. So can I just get confirmation again that if such a group as a community council wishes to make representations, they can do that directly with the Scottish Government? And what would the procedure be? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie. I don't know if Morag or Anne can respond to that.
Yes, I can. The representations could be made to the Energy Consents Unit of the Scottish Government. That the case number can be provided. Just waiting for. I can actually provide the case number if you just give me a moment. The Scottish Government Energy Consents Unit, there's an advanced search field, and the reference number for the case is ECU 00001850. So that's ECU 4 zeros and 1850. That's the case reference. There's an opportunity there to submit representations. And all the documentation is available on that website as well.
Okay, thanks very much for that response, Morag. Turn to Noddy MacDonald. Mr. Manford, you've still got your hand up. Will you want to come back in? Or?
No, thank you. Just didn't take it back down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manford. Councillor Noddy MacDonald.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'd just like to commend the planning department on their work in ensuring that a local community scheme gets their ambitions realised by including the condition. We're very grateful for that. I think bombarding you guys for the last 2 days with emails and in particular the Director for Communities as well. I always got a timely response right away, and I'm very grateful for that, as are the community developer for Knock and Swordy Grazings. I think the added condition will give them a bit of comfort, and then they can start quickly to sort out the lease. I think there's a lease awaiting, and the negotiations they have with EDF as well. Hopefully now this will be the catalyst for them to get that project further off the ground. And I think the encouragement given by ourselves and the conditions to help them to work with the developer will get them up and running. And we can now look forward to the element of a little bit of community feedback, particularly for Skiro Row anyway. So we're delighted with that. And thank you very much for all the work you've done in allowing this condition to be included. Thanks for that.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor MacDonald. I'm not seeing any other hands coming up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, gone. Can I ask Morag to bring up the screen with recommendations, please? Is that easy for you to do, Morag? Is it on silent, Morag? Thank you. There'll be no further questions then. Can I move the recommendations as at paragraph 14.2 of the report and recommending that A, B, C, D and E and the core that informs Scottish ministers that there is no requirement for public local inquiry, and an early decision is very much in the wider public interest. I propose that we accept that recommendation.
Convener, I take it that will be with the additional wording, paragraph 14.2 of the report, which was detailed in the presentation in relation to 12.25.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do I have a seconder for that?
I will second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mackay. Is there any amendments to that? Not seeing any hands, so thank you very much, and that concludes that item on the agenda. And again, I would certainly like to give my own appreciation to Morag and Anne and those in the planning department, but also those in sustainable development as well, for getting us to this stage. So thank you very much for all your efforts. I know it's not been easy in the last while to do that, but we certainly appreciate the work that you do in the interests of our community. So thank you very much for that. Can I move on then to item 5, appointment to vacancies? And it's a report by the Chief Executive and seeks appointments of quorum members to vacancies on HHP.
You bring back the ones that are the boys that are away. You bring back the members.
Sorry,
Marina's doing that.
Doing in the minute. Just double check that.
Right. We'll just wait a few minutes. Thanks for that, John. We'll wait a few minutes just to be sure that everybody's back on.
That's, that's everyone back in.
Okay, thank you for that, Marina. That's everybody back in, and we're on item 5, appointments to vacancies, and the report seeks appointments of COLA members to vacancies on HHP, Aberdeen Housing Partnership, North Heritage Trust, Hebrides Ferry Users Group, Barra, the Lewis and Harris, Western Isles Integration Joint Board, substitute member, and Western Isles Licensing Board. And this is following the resignation of Councillor Paul Finnegan. And I'll now ask for nominations for these vacancies as follows. Can I start with Aberdeen Housing Partnership first? I'm seeing Councillor Mitchell's got his hand up. Councillor Mitchell, and then Councillor Murray. Councillor Mitchell.
Okay, thank you, Convener. I don't know if it's actually competent to mention 2 at a time, but is that competent, or do we do 1 at a time?
I think we do 1 at a time.
1 at a time, okay. Therefore, I would want to propose Councillor Fulton for the position on the board of HHP.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that?
I'll second that.
Councillor Norman MacDonald is seconding that. Are there any other nominations for HHP? Councillor Gordon Murray, are you? No.
I was going to second Councillor Mitchell, but Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you for that.
So.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Colin McLean, were you looking to nominate somebody for the HHP position?
Yes, can I nominate John Norman MacLeod?
Is there a seconder for that?
Seconder, Convener.
So that's Councillor John Norman MacLeod, proposed by Councillor Colin, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. Are there any further nominations for the HHP board place? No. So we'll have to run a ballot on that, and I'll hand over to our election.
Convener, could I ask one thing? Does geographical spread come into this at all?
It's not specific to it, but it just depends. It depends on who's nominated and who gets the votes. I don't think it is based on geography. It's based on the skills that people bring to the board, if I'm honest. I'll bring in the Chief Executive.
Yes, Convener, there's no specific geographic consideration, but we always seek to ensure that there is balance between members from Lewis and Harris and Euston Borough. It's really on that basis, because there are not many places on the board of HHP.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask Derek to work out how we're going to
Convener, we would ordinarily do a ballot for appointments to any position by secret ballot. Now, we could do that by possibly adjourning for 5 minutes and allowing every member to email Marina Macaulay directly, although I understand some members have been having their trouble with the emails, or we could have a roll call ballot.
Would you prefer a roll call ballot or sending emails? And again, that might be an issue for folk as well. We've had problems with
roll call, please.
Roll call. Okay. I'll ask Derek to take us through the process then.
Okay. Thank you, Convener. I will call out the names on the sedierent. If you call out either Fulton or MacLeod, depending on who you are voting for. So, Convener,
Fulton,
Leader, Leader, Okay. Colin McMillan.
Fulton.
Sorry, was that the leader coming in there?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. McLeod.
Okay. Ian Archer McNeil.
McLeod.
Donald Manford.
McLeod.
Paul Francis Steele.
McLeod.
Roddy Mackay.
McLeod.
Ian M. McLeod.
McLeod.
Ushan Robertson.
McLeod.
Grant Fulton.
Fulton.
Paul Finnegan.
Fulton.
John Mitchell.
Fulton.
Ronald Fraser.
McLeod.
Angus Morrison.
McLeod.
Norrie MacDonald.
Fulton.
Alistair McLeod.
McLeod.
Sidney Stewart.
McLeod.
Keith Johnson.
McLeod.
Ray Mackenzie.
Fulton.
Angus McCormack. Angus McCormack. Charlie Nicholson.
McLeod.
Ian M. Macaulay.
McLeod.
Neil Mackay.
McLeod.
Gordon Murray.
Fulton.
Donald Crichton.
McLeod.
Johnny McKeever.
Absent.
Oh, sorry, absent, yeah. Colin McLean.
McLeod.
John Mackay.
McLeod.
John Norton McLeod.
McLeod.
Kenneth McLeod.
McLeod.
And King John McLeod.
McLeod.
That's 21 votes for McLeod, 8 votes for Fulton.
Okay, thank you for that. So that's Councillor John Norman McLeod representing the Cornwall HHP. Can we move on to our Northern Heritage Trust? Nominations for volunteers for Northern Heritage Trust. Councillor Mitchell, have you got your hand up again?
Yes.
Councillor Mitchell, you're on mute.
Sorry, that was my alternative, my second possibility of proposing things. So I'm proposed Councillor Fulton for the position on Northern Heritage Trust.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that?
Seconded.
Yeah.
So that's Councillor Ray Mackenzie. Are there any other nominations? Mr. Manford, you've got your hand up.
I was seconding. I didn't get the hand down quick enough.
Okay, thank you for that. So there are no other nominations. So Councillor Fulton is representing the Northern Heritage Trust. Thank you for that. Move on to Hebrides Ferry Users Group. That's Barra, the Lewis and Harris. And again, I'm looking for nominations for that. Ferry Users Group. I'm not seeing any hands going up. No, nobody proposing anybody for the Hebrides Ferry Users Group. Councillor Gordon Murray, you've got your hand up now.
I'll propose Councillor Donald Manford.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just check it.
Sorry, Derek's looking at something just now, are you?
Yes, I'm just. Don Manford is already a member, of the Lewis and Harris Ferry Users Group.
Okay, so Donald's already on that group, Gordon.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Just to be helpful, the other members are Councillor Ian M. MacLeod, Councillor Donald Manford, Councillor John Mackay, Councillor Ian A. McNeill.
Can I get some clarity, please? Does that mean that there's nobody from Harris on it? Is that why Paul was on it?
I mean, there was as the Chief Executive said, there is always an element of geography in the equation. And given that you already have 2 votes, given that you've been nominated twice, you should take advantage of that, Councillor Manford. But it is generally on a geographical basis. When it comes to issues like ferries and air services, it's important that we maintain that balance. I'm seeing Councillor Roddy Mackay.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a question about Harris, and I think it would be good if we could get a member from Harris. And would Grant Fulton be willing to take that position? I would propose him if he would.
Councillor Roddy Mackay proposing Councillor.
Happy to second that.
Seconded by Councillor Manford. Thank you for that. I'm not seeing any further hands going up for nominations. No. So we move on to the Western Isles Integration Joint Board, a substitute member. And this is generally, if there aren't four council members, then somebody else can come in as substitute. So I'll invite people to nominate. Again, if geography is important to people, let them reflect that in how they go. So Western Isles Integration Joint Board substitute member, could I have nominations for that, please?
Could we hear who's on that at the present time, convener?
Yes, I'll ask Derek to
if you bear with me, I've just left that in the office, but I can go and get that. I'll just
okay.
A couple of minutes.
Derek's got a sheet of paper with that on. Can we come back to that one?
I don't mind if
the
members want, just make it easier.
Yeah. We'll
do the licensing board. We'll do the licensing board first, if that's okay. So we're looking for nominations for the Western Isles Licensing Board. Nominations. I'm seeing Gordon Murray with his hand up.
Can I propose Councillor Callum McMillan?
Callum McMillan. Do we have a seconder for that?
I'll second that.
Again, it's between Noddy and Donald Martin. I think Noddy was just pipped you to the post. So Noddy MacDonald is seconded Councillor Murray. Are there any other nominations for the licensing board? No. Okay, so that resolves that matter. I'm seeing Councillor Callum McMillan with your hand up, Callum.
Okay. Thank you, convener. I would like to thank the proposer and the seconder. I'm not sure if familiarity with licensed premises is a requisite for that board, but certainly I would have to admit that I am very familiar with licensed premises, so thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so that means that Councillor McMillan is now a member of, well, will be a member of the licensing board. Can we go back then to the Western Isles Integration Joint Board and Chief Executive? Who are the members and the substitute members, please?
Thank you, convener. The substantive members are Councillors Angus Morrison, yourself, convener, and Councillor Paul Steele. The substitute members are Councillor Callum McMillan, Councillor Finlay Stewart, Councillor Ian A. McNeill, and Councillor Finnegan. Sorry, did I miss out?
Just for correction, Mr.
Councillor Kenny John MacLeod. So.
Councillor Kenny John MacLeod is a substantive member as well.
Yes.
So it's really to fill the vacancy that is there within the substitute membership.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that people cannot attend the meeting as substitute members, because I think, maybe Kenny John can comment on this, but I think it's important that people have a decent understanding of what is going on within the IGB, and you can't do that if you only attend the meeting once a year. There is, there is encouragement for substitute members to participate in the process, but ultimately, if it comes to a vote between the NHS and the CORLA, then it'll only be the substantive members that will be able to vote on that. So there's no barrier to attending meetings. I'm seeing Councillor.
Can I endorse? Can I just endorse that what you just said? Can we encourage all substitute members to attend as many as possible, and in order just to have a full understanding of the workings of the IGB? Certainly endorse what you said there.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Councillor McLeod. Councillor Charlie Nicholson.
Convener, can I propose Councillor Ian Macaulay?
Councillor Ian Macaulay, is there a seconder for that?
I'll second that.
I'll second.
Councillor, I think Councillor Ray Mackenzie was first to second it. Councillor Macaulay, are you happy to do that? I'm not seeing any. Are there any other?
Thank you for the nomination. I think I'll leave that one. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Mr. Macaulay. We're still looking for a nomination for that position. Anybody else coming forward? No. Okay, we can leave it and maybe come back to it. Sorry, Councillor Kenny John McLeod.
I was just wondering if Councillor Donald Crichton would be willing. If he was, I would certainly propose.
Councillor Crichton.
Thank you, convener. That's very kind of Summerflood, but I have to decline. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Crichton and Councillor McLeod. Can we just leave it at the moment then, and we will try and persuade somebody to do it within the normal meeting series. We can bring it up again at the next meeting, and that will give anybody who may be interested, give them the opportunity to find out what's involved in the process. So we can leave that one as it is at the moment. Okay, so that's us filled all these vacancies. Can we move on then to item 6, committee decision reports, and for approval for recommendations in the decision reports. And the first one of that is Communities and Housing Committee on the 26th of January, and proposed by Councillor Kenny John.
Can I move? Thank you, Chair.
And seconded by, I think, Paul Steele.
Yeah, second that.
Seconded by Paul Steele, and there are no amendments being raised in relation to that. We move on to Education, Sport and Children's Services Committee on the 26th of January, and again looking for a proposer for that, and that would again be Paul Steele, I think. I think you were appointed that very same afternoon. That's correct.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I move that.
You move the recommendations, and seconded by?
Second that. Councillor Finnegan.
Councillor Finnegan. Okay. And there are no amendments intimated on that. Transportation and Infrastructure on the 27th of January.
Sorry, there was an amendment intimated for the Education, Sport and Children's Services Committee.
Well, nobody's raised their hand. Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thank you, convener. I was unclear if it was to be accepted, given that the timeline, but thank you. If it's going to be accepted, I'd like to move an amendment.
Can we hear what the amendment says?
If you bear with me.
Convener, the amendment which we have notified and which was competent was that the Corla refer the respite policy back to Education, Sport and Children's Services Committee to allow consideration of the eligibility criteria, the inclusion of an appeals mechanism and other amendments suggested by elected members. Is that the email to which Councillor Money refers?
It is, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Money. Is there a seconder for that?
I'll second that.
Ray McKenzie. Can I ask the chair if he's prepared to accept that amendment, or will we go to debate on it? And Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Convener. No, I won't be accepting that. Go to debate, please.
Okay, thank you. So we will now go into formal debate on that issue. And Derek, can you?
Yeah, the motion.
Can I just check first of all that everybody has had a copy of that amendment? I'll take.
Sorry, Convener, we haven't circulated that round. It has been read out.
No.
I can read it again.
Right. Can you just hold on a second, and I'll ask the Chief Executive. Can I ask the Chief Executive to read out again what the amendment is, and then we'll move forward from there. So, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Convener. It's essentially a referral back to the committee, but the wording is as follows: that the Corla refer the respite policy back to Education, Sport and Children's Services Committee to allow consideration of the eligibility criteria, the inclusion of an appeals mechanism and other amendments suggested by elected members.
Thank you for that. We will go into formal debate then, since we have a mover and seconder for an amendment, and also I'm assuming Mr. Stevens a seconder for your motion as well.
Point of order.
I'll second that.
Paul Finnegan's seconded that. So we are going into formal debate now.
Point of order, Convener.
Carry on.
Can I ask that we seek the view of Mr. Gibson before we go into formal debate, because we won't be able to do so when we in formal debate.
I'd like to back that, Convener. It's a good idea.
Mr. Gibson, can you speak to this before we go into formal debate?
Sure. Okay. I wouldn't intend to repeat all the rationale behind the policy or the needs addressed through it, because I think that's been talked about in two committees and one Corla, and I think it is generally accepted, and it certainly was last time at Corla, that the policy is a good thing, while accepting there's clearly some debate about that. And I know Councillor Murray has had some communication with myself where there is an acceptance of the general need for such a policy. We're presenting it back for approval in line with the December Corla decision, where we were asked to take a pause, and that was elected members' language, in order to look at potential tweaks. Again, that was elected members' language. I did invite all elected members, if they had any further input, in an email on the 18th of December. No points were raised with myself or Emma McSween in terms of the interest of adult services, and no individual service users' circumstances were referred to us. And Emma and myself have consistently said we would be open to any such presentation of individuals to us, and remain so. We have had a further carer strategy group meeting, and no new issues were raised, and reassurances were repeated There's clearly a block between the reassurances we're giving some groups and the reassurances permeating to the service users. We're aware of this and we'll need to address this through some further direct communication with service users. Subsequent to these meetings, we did tweak the policy to strengthen the references to how those whose needs are not fully coped with within the framework, with how they could be escalated, and those with exceptional need can have their situation referred to the director or head of service. So there has been tweaks. It's fully accepted once the policy is adopted. There will require to be work undertaken in ensuring communication during its rollout and make sure that that's clear and accessible to all, given the client groups we're dealing with. So, for example, there'll need to be an easy read version made available, and we're already talking about doing that along with the Speak Out group. From the point of view of children's services, I think it's really important we have information on this that's accessible to children who may be getting the respite, primary age children and adolescents. And that once we have the policy adopted and we know exactly what we're communicating, then we'll do that bit of work. It needs to be subsequent to this process. The policy was presented again to Education and Children's Services last week. Questions and comments were invited. None emerged. The policy passed through committee without comment or question at all. At this juncture, the policy has taken more than a year to develop, consult on, review. That's included equality impact assessments, and most recently it's included a pause to go back and see if there's any further tweaks. We have attempted to approach the project with transparency, and again, Emma McSween and I have met on a number of occasions with various elected members. The policy was adopted in December 2020 by the IGB in relation to adult services. The main point is we now want to concentrate on the provision of equitable services. We want to have transparent assessment processes. We want to get on with doing the work rather than developing the policy over quite a period of time. And for examples of this, we want to be engaging with members in US, Barra, Harris, Rural Lewis, and looking at how we strengthen services in these areas as well. And finally, just because I've got the opportunity, I do want to thank and recognise the work of all the officers who have been involved in this. This is not my policy. A group of people have done work over many months, steadfastly working through and persevering through the competing demands of the COVID situation to get us to this point. At this stage, I would not be looking at major changes. We spent an awful lot of time getting to this stage, and the delay further, I think, would be unfortunate. So that would be my comments. And again, I'm always willing to speak to members out with this about all the various ups and downs. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that information, Mr. Gibson. Can we move forward into formal debate? The order of debate will be Councillor Paul Steele first, followed by Councillor Gordon Murray putting the amendment, and then summing up will be Councillor Paul Finnegan for the motion and Councillor Ray McKenzie for the amendment. And you have 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes each, to make your presentation. Councillor Paul Steele to begin with.
Thank you, convener. I think David said most of what I'm going to say, but what I'll say is before I begin, I would just like to say that I'm sure there will be a consensus with all members in thanking the officers for continuing to offer services within tight financial restrictions. I know the officers are appreciative of Gordon's understanding of the amount of work that's gone into getting the policy to this stage and the openness with which they've approached its development. I would say that this policy was approved by the Education Committee back in December before an amendment at the full council to delay till the next series to allow members a bit more time to go through it, to alleviate concerns, tweak a couple of things. David Gibson extended an offer, as he mentioned, to all members to contact him to go through the issues they had with the policy. It came up again at the Education, Sport and Children's Services Committee last week with a couple of tweaks, but no questions were asked and comments made about the policy, and the recommendation was agreed. Earlier today, I was informed of another amendment asking for sections of it to be amended, removed or added, but in my view, I would have expected any significant changes or amendments to the policy from members to have been addressed in the time since the last Corlia and the committee. It wasn't accepted because it was late. Some of the points raised in that related to complaints procedures within which this policy refers to, and would possibly require the corporate complaints policy to change. That would need to be changed through a different means, not through this policy, and this policy would then be amended to take that change into account. Other points refer to eligibility criteria, which again is a reference to a different Corlia policy. If that was changed, it would require the reference in this respite policy to be changed after that. Officers now need and want to turn their energies to offering transparent assessment and equitable provision throughout the islands. Further delays result in energy and resources being expended and not on delivering services. This respite policy has also been agreed by the IJB as far as their interests are concerned. So at this stage, I will be carrying forward the view of the committee that we should recommend this policy. I will say, however, that we do need to be communicating with each other a bit better. So whatever way this vote goes, I've spoken to David Gibson, and I'm proposing that we arrange for regular strategic group meetings with members who would like to attend to allow us to get clarification and be advised by the professionals in their areas of concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thank you, convener, and thank you for the opportunity. I had sent round a substantive amendment this afternoon, but unfortunately I missed the deadline, and I'm grateful for this amendment, which is referring it back to Education and Children's Services. If members have a look at the substantive document that I sent round, you'll see the nature of the changes that I would be proposing if it were referred back to education. If we look at number 1, there's the amendment looks at the support plan, and we would look to have a support plan developed in partnership between the social worker and the cared and cared for. The carer and cared for, and must be agreed with both parties. And we're asking this because there are often times that carers cannot take up the offer as a service offered, or the timing of it is not suitable for very valid reasons, and carers need sometimes the local authority to remain with them until a suitable alternative is found. If we look at number 2, what we're looking to put in is that reviews are regular in terms of, even annual reviews. Reviews should be carried out at least once a year. The reason for putting that in is annual reviews are universally considered to be good practice, and social workers tell carers cared for that their assessments will be reviewed annually, but sometimes it doesn't happen for maybe a variety of reasons. Another change that I'll be looking for would be resource panels, and if decisions are written decisions on rationale on respite is lodged with the resource panel, that it just be shared with the carer, because I think it's a matter of good practice to automatically share such documents with families. Carers cared for should not have to make special requests for this. Another change which I would be looking for would be on transport, and add the words, while CORLA does not have a statutory responsibility to provide assisted transport, it recognises that those living in rural locations away from central respite services will have further to travel, and as a result may face higher costs. Full consideration of assisted transport will be made at the assessment stage, and where need is evident, provision will be made, because such an amendment to the statement provides for some equity of travel expenses impacts on families in our dispersed rural communities. Other parts, I would say one of the most important parts is at Appendix 1 of the respite policy. There's a table called indicative levels, and these are not indicative levels of respite, and I would not consider these as indicative levels, because I would say they represent caps in the amount of respite someone can access. So if we're putting caps on respite, this is more a service-led policy rather than a needs-led, and this is of huge concern to people who maybe have used up their respite provision and need more, but because they've hit the maximum allowed, they won't be able to have respite. So these were comments made to me after the carer strategy meeting just a few weeks ago, where I completely concur with the fact that the department has worked very hard. The respite policy is a good thing, but we want to get it right. I understand, yes, it was referred back in December. Sorry?
1 minute to go, Mr. Murray.
I understand completely that it was referred back in December and over Christmas time, but I think these comments will help us, will help the department if put in, and probably have low levels of concern raised. But at the moment, there are people that are concerned. There are carers who have expressed concerns to a number of councillors. So what I'm trying to do is help the department in putting these tweaks through and have us work together in partnership with those who are impacted most by this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Can I turn now to Councillor Paul Finnegan, seconding the motion?
Thanks, Chair. I'm not going to say a great deal. I just want to follow really on what Councillor Paul Steele has already said. I mean, this is almost 2 years now, really, we're getting towards this. Has been ongoing. David and his team have worked very hard to try and engage with all groups, and I think that he's really done that. It's come back. We've had an amendment, and it's come back, and as has been said, no comments were really made on that. We keep going back and back and back, and there comes a point where we have to make a decision here. And I have to say that I think that on behalf of the officers, David, Emma, Graham and Isabel, they're tired, and to be honest, they feel quite demoralised by this. You know, so they make a decision, or they bring forward a very good policy, and we're constantly going back more than once, more than twice, to say, look, we need to look at this again. We need to look at this again. You know, this service needs to be put into place now, and I think we really need to actually get on and do it. You know, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Finnegan. Turn to Councillor Ray Mackenzie, seconding the amendment. Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to get on here. I'm disappointed, actually. You know, when we use things like it's up to people to communicate better. It's not the members. It's not a lack of communication between members. These are representations that are made to us, and I think it's a good, really a good document. But there have been slight changes, and you've probably all seen the document in red, where things, and quite a few of the paragraphs, it's all accepted and added on to these, like 4, 5 and 6, for instance, and will be shared with the carer. Now, I think that's quite a reasonable thing to do. I'm not quite sure if Mr. Gibson is saying that none of these things in red will be taken on board, or can there be further dialogue as things go on? I remember the document. I don't have it in front of me, but I remember the document said something about take-up of respite. Now we're talking about the most vulnerable people in the community here, and the people that have to look after them 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. And it says the take-up of respite was something in the 30-odd%. Now, if somebody who is prepared to look after their child or adult for three weeks in a row, but need maybe a weekend off, then that person could be offered something in the middle of the week, but they don't need it. Now that presumably goes down in statistics as non-taken up of respite, and that's not the case at all. It's just that they can't take up the respite. Now, Mr. Gibson might have been able to explain that further, but I think the document should not be thrown out. I think the document is very good, but there are points which the people that are really making use of it are requiring to firm up on. And I would. It's not a question of. I don't think we should say we're not communicating, but we're representing things that have been put to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Are there any other members who wish to speak on this item before we sum up? Councillor Cull Macmillan.
Thank you, Convener. My concern here, it's not a matter, it's a very good, as Councillor Mackenzie said, it's a very good report, and much of it I agree with. But the concern here is that we are the policymakers. Now, as the head of service said, they had developed a policy, and that is very good. But we have to look at it in detail sometimes as the policymakers to see where we take this, so that we put our stamp on it, so that we are happy with it, and that we are representing our constituents. Otherwise, we are no better than nodding donkeys in the paddock. And it's that sort of problem that I have. We, as the councillors, must engage to develop policy. And sometimes it takes something like this, that it not necessarily goes back once or twice, but enough times that we are happy with it and add to it. And all of the stuff that I had seen from Councillor Murray today was all very laudable. And I think that the report would benefit further from the inclusion of these policy items. And that's where I would want us to go. For the sake of a month or 6 weeks till the end of March, we would be better to include that in. And if it means coming back to education again, then I would recommend that we as policymakers take our responsibilities and duties seriously and consider the amendments proposed by Councillors Murray and Mackenzie, and then look at it again, and if we have to discuss it, then that we do so. But it's certainly an item where we as councillors have to be in charge of policy making, and I'm very grateful for the service for taking it this far, but it's something that we have to look at again. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Macmillan. Councillor John Alderman MacLeod.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, I attended the meeting last week with Jack, and they came up. They said they'd come up with a few things, you know, a couple of wee things. It wasn't much, and to be honest, we're very close, and they're very close to being happy with the policy, with the respite policy. I mean, it's not easy for them. It has been an eye-opener for me going to these meetings and meeting parents with vulnerable children, and it's not easy at all. So I think we're very close to them being happy with the department. And I just want to also mention David and Emma, and I know they've put a pair of work into this, you know, and they are really trying to get it sorted, and it's getting there. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod. Councillor Charlie Nicholson, followed by Councillor Cull MacLean.
Thank you, Convener. And I'm not going to go over the information that Councillor Murray did there, but it's a very good policy. It's before us. The situation is that it needs to be tweaked, and I'm led to believe when we put forward the suggestions that Councillor Murray has described. The comment that came back to my information is that I would confer with your reflection of the substantial nature of the number of changes within the document. So basically saying that what has been presented here, there is a need to kind of add to the document, because at the end of the day, as Councillor Macmillan indicated, this is about the families. This is about getting it right. We're nearly there. We just have to put the cherry on the cake, and then they can move forward. And we're very thankful to the staff, to Emma and David and all the work, and also the partner groups that have been involved in this. But these are a few things just to dot the I's, cross the T's, and then the policy can move forward. At the end of the day, every one of us in this chamber, we want the best. And that's what we're discussing here. It's not criticism or major criticism or anything in any way. There's a very good policy that has been worked on over a certain amount of time. And now we're at the situation that we just need to dot the I's, cross the T's, get these points in that have come from the families and the different groups to us. And yes, the chair of education is right, Councillor Steele, that did go through Education Children's Services, but it's come back to us by individuals and from a group in regards to they wish these things added just to make it 100% right. It's about 98% there. So let's add these things in, and then it'll support all the families and all those that are involved and take it forward in the good work that's been going on for years in respite and in other areas to support these families that have very challenging situations. So I will be supporting Councillor Murray in regards to this. Thank you, Convener, for allowing me to come in.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Callum McLean.
Thanks, Convener. I'm not going to reiterate what has already been expressed today, but let me first of all say I realise the frustrations of David and Emma and team. I know we've been asked to tweak this and tweak that and tweak this, and he has done, and Emma and the team have done a wonderful job and a good job in coming to this stage with the respite care policy. But we're, as already mentioned about it, we're dealing with the most affected, most vulnerable people in our society. And I was looking through the emails we've been having the last day or two. This year is Hebridean Year of Care 2021. We're talking about a National Care Day on Friday, the 19th of February. Let us give a little time. And I think David acknowledges, if I'm not mistaken, you can cover me on this, is that he does attest that these are tweaks to it. They're not fundamental significant changes. They are tweaks to the policy which will enhance the policy and will enhance the lives of those who are affected, both cared for and carers. And let's just a little while, just a little time to get this better. And every one of us, and I'm sure David and Emma would say, these little tweaks will in fact make it better. And let's just give it a little time. And I appeal to councillors on the behalf of these ones, who most of us meet from day to day. They are needy people. And it's just a little bit of time, surely, in this year of care. And I appeal to you, and I would be supporting Gordon Murray's amendment. And I'm glad he's got it in, even at the 11th hour. So be it, if it's at the 11th hour. Let us give these people an opportunity. They deserve it, folks. I don't deal with what these parents and what these carers are dealing with every day of their lives, 24/7. If this enhances this in a little bit, surely we can give a little bit of time. We're not saying that the policy is to be, as a matter of fact, every one of us saying the policy is very, very good. And I appeal to you all here, and I appeal to the chair and the vice chair of education as well. Could you accept just this little bit of leeway for this time?
Thank you, Councillor McLean. Councillor John Norman McLeod, you've still got your hand up. Just waiting to see if there's any other hands going up. Anybody else wanting to contribute before I close down the debate? Councillor Roddy Mackay, the leader.
Thank you. I'm hearing these earnest calls for a little time and a little more time, and talk about most affected and most vulnerable. And it's as if some of us aren't aware of the most affected and most vulnerable. And certainly the people who are more aware of them in our council are people like David, who are meeting with them and working with them and trying to establish this policy. So, I genuinely believe that David and Emma, as I'm sure most members have said, have done a good job here. And as even John Norman himself said, it's very, very close. We have to be, if we're going to be policy makers, we have to take the advice of officers, and we have to let them do their work, as well as listening to people who come to us as parents or as members of our community. Now, Paul himself, as Chair of Education, I know he's worked alongside David on this policy, so I think he knows it even better than I do, and probably many of us. So, I think we just have to crack on with it. If it's a very good policy and it needs to be tweaked going forward, I'm not too sure of many policies that we pass that aren't tweaked here and there as we go forward. So let's crack on with it. It's been to the relevant committee twice. It's been through the council once already. This is at risk of becoming a never-ending loop, and actually we'll end up not doing the service we should to the people who need it. At the last council, all that was asked for was a short pause, which I'm hearing again, to allow people to come up with suggested tweaks, which has happened, and it's been before the committee again with tweaks, and it's made progress. The head of service offered to answer questions at committee last week. There was none. There wasn't any suggestion that the policy needed change. Where has the work been going on, or where is the consultation going on? Why has nobody come back through the committee system to raise these issues? And now we're coming in at the last minute. So the head of service also went further. He wrote to members, inviting comments, and none were received. Changes to the eligibility criteria would require debate and change in other policy and guidance first. It's not simply tweaking, as it's the eligibility criteria and the complaints process which would have to be changed, and then the respite policy would follow suit. That would take some time. Otherwise, we're going to have a mess of a parallel and different policies in different areas of practice. And that's not desirable, and it's barely competent. We do know also the IJP has already approved the policy and is implementing it. So we could have two separate policies. We've got one the IJP are doing, two sets of criteria, two types of appeals and complaints procedures depending on the age of the service user. That's not the point of the policy. And at the end of the day, if we don't have an equitable service across IJB in terms of the health and education inputs, we're actually denying our clients a good service. So I think everybody's of the same view that it's a good policy, and I think we should continue with it to progress it, and then if we need tweaks down the line. But this never ending going back and forth, we're not doing a service to our communities or to the service users, and we're certainly not been very adept at pushing through policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. Any other hands going up? Councillor John Mackay.
Thank you, Convener. I fully agree with what the leader's been saying. I think we don't. The last thing we need is a two-tier system here for our vulnerable people, and I think we should really appreciate what David Gibson and the team have done in the past weeks. And this has gone through the education last week, and there was no word of opposing it, and now we're here and we're bringing up this up at the last minute. I agree with a lot of what's been said on both sides, but I will be going with the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. Councillor Kenny John MacLeod.
Thank you, Convener. I think all members want to see this policy implemented. It was deferred in December to allow these minor tweaks to be done And it came up again at Education, Children's Services. And as has been said, no member expressed any fundamental concern about the direction of travel. And as the leader said, there is no perfect policy. We have never passed a perfect policy. And I would like to think that we will reflect on the implementation of policy and review this policy and like every other policy. I wasn't quite sure whether my colleague Councillor Murray was speaking to his amendment that wasn't accepted or the one that was accepted when he was making his introductory comments. But I have no fundamental issue with anything of what he says. But I think we do really need to move forward on this, and we have a policy that's being implemented, and they're adult vulnerable and they're young vulnerable. I mean, there's no difference in the need for respite, and the reality is that there is a finite resource there that we have in terms of capacity to deliver respite, and if we don't accept that reality, we are living in times where there's nobody likes to say there's rationing, but there is a finite amount of services that we can deliver and respite that we can deliver because of the limitations of personnel, because of limitations of finance, and a whole lot of other reasons. So let's just implement this policy across the board so that our young people and our elderly, those who are caring for our elderly, have got an equitable access to respite. And let's reflect and review on the policy in its implementation as we do with every other policy. I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod. I'm not seeing any other hands up on Councillor Murray's. So can I take it then that we're all finished in relation to this particular report? Okay, I'll take it then that we move now to the summing up. And I'll ask Councillor Gordon Murray to speak first for 2 minutes, and then follow with Councillor Paul Steele for 2 minutes. So, Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Convener. Just to address some of the points that were raised, and I'm thankful for those who spoke up in favour of my amendment. They made some excellent points articulating what I'm trying to achieve. If I mentioned to Councillor Kenny John MacLeod about me speaking to the amendment that wasn't accepted, I want to tell him these are the sort of items that are behind this amendment, the issues that have been raised with myself and others. I hear members' frustration that it wasn't raised in education, and why has it been raised here? This is the forum. This is a full council. Are we saying that this is completely futile to do this? Are you can members not raise these items at full council? I think that's what you're telling us. There seems to be a lot about the process rather than the substance of the policy. We're in a democracy, not a bureaucracy, and this is the democratic forum to make policy, as Councillor McMullen said this. This is feedback, as a lot of members said, from the most vulnerable, and I'm putting it to you in this way so that we can listen to them and put it into the policy and help them, and so that we can move on together. The words I've used: sharing, partnership, equity of provision, needs-based. I understand that the department have made a lot of work on this, and I don't want them to feel demoralised. But we've also got to think about the service users who have concerns with this policy that's going to impact them the most. But thank you for the time, and I urge you to support my amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Turn now to Councillor Paul Steele to sum up again for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Convener. I'm not going to say too much. I think the points raised by Councillor John Mackay, Kenny John and Roddy kind of covered what I was going to say in summing up. But basically, a lot of the issues that were raised by Gordon, I mean, a lot of them were covered, raised and addressed in the Cater Strategy Group, and there's been significant consultation. But there might be some some merit to some of the points he's making, but the emphasis I would put on it is that they're not really relevant to this policy, and that, for example, the eligibility criteria is a different policy that would have to be addressed, and then it would be reflected in the respite policy. So, like I say, while there may be some sympathy and some merit in his argument, I don't think it's relevant to this policy as it stands. And I mean, the point was made that this is relevant in relation to children, and it's already been agreed, so we'd have a disparity in provision there, and we're looking for equitable provision, especially throughout the islands. And just on Ray Mackenzie's point about communicating better, that was kind of in relation to, I mean, we had a month and then we didn't bring anything back to the committee that it was going to be brought up at. So I think we just need to be talking to each other in between rather than just waiting till a committee or a Corgia to be making these points. It'd be good for us to build on that dialogue. So it wasn't a slight, it was just a different way of working going forward. That's me.
Thank you very much, Councillor Steele. And we now go to counting the votes. And just for making sure that everybody knows what they're doing, the motion is in the name of Councillor Paul Steele, seconded by Councillor Finnegan. And the amendment is in the name of Councillor Gordon Murray, seconded by Councillor Ray Mackenzie. Councillor McNeill, I'm seeing your hand up, but in reality, the debate has been closed once the seconder and the proposer of the motion have finished speaking. So your hand is up.
Yes, Chair. Yes, Chair. I appreciate that. I am declaring an interest since I'm a carer, and my wife also receives care, so I won't be voting on this.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we'll take note of that you've declared an interest in this topic. Okay. Can we move then to the decision, and I'll ask Derek Mackay to take us through that. And again, I'm assuming that you're happy to do it through roll call. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Convener.
Yeah.
Motion.
Leader.
Motion.
Colin McMillan.
Amendment.
John Manford. Joel Manford. Paul Steele.
Motion.
Guy.
Motion.
Ian M. MacLeod.
Motion.
Ushan Robertson.
Motion.
Grant Fulton.
Amendment.
Paul Finnegan.
Motion.
John Mitchell.
Amendment.
Ram Fraser.
Amendment.
Angus Morrison.
Motion.
Norrie MacDonald.
Motion.
Alistair MacLeod.
Motion.
Finlay Stewart.
Motion.
Keith Johnson.
Motion.
Ray Mackenzie.
Amendment.
Angus McCormack.
Motion.
Charlie Nicholson.
Amendment.
Ian Macaulay.
Amendment.
Neil Mackay.
Amendment.
Gordon Murray.
Amendment.
Donald Crichton.
Motion.
Colin McLean.
Amendment.
John Mackay.
Motion.
John Norton MacLeod.
Amendment.
Kenneth MacLeod.
Amendment.
And Kenny John MacLeod.
Motion.
16, 12. 16, 13.
16, 12. 16 for the motion, 12 for the amendment.
16 for the motion, name of Councillor Steele, Councillor Finnegan, and 12 for the amendment in the name of Murray and Ray McKenzie. Thank you very much for that. That concludes the rest of the committee decision reports. Can move on now to Transportation and Infrastructure Committee on the 27th of January 2021. Councillor Robertson.
Yes, I move the recommendations of Transportation and Infrastructure Committee of Wednesday, 27th January 2021.
Seconded by Councillor MacLeod.
I second that, Convener.
Thank you, and there are no issues arising out of that. Sustainable Development Committee on the 27th January 2021.
Thank you, Convener. I move the committee decision report of the meeting of the 27th of January.
Thank you very much. Seconded by Norrie MacDonald. Again, there are no issues arising out of that. Audit and Scrutiny Committee on the 2nd of February 2021. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Convener. I move the committee decision report of the Audit and Scrutiny Committee of the 2nd of February 2021.
Thank you for that. Seconded by Councillor Macaulay.
Yes, happy to second that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Macaulay. Move on to Policy and Resources Committee, 3rd of February 2021. I think that's pretty much today still. Council Leader.
Thank you, Convener. I move for approval of today's PNR Committee decision report.
Seconded by Councillor MacLeod.
I support that. Thank you.
And there are no issues arising out of that committee decision report. I would remind members that a Teams invite for the budget seminar at 3 o'clock tomorrow.
Convener.
Sorry, Gordon.
Convener, can I make a point of order, please?
Let's hear what it is.
The reports we've considered were not given to us with 3 clear days before the meeting. As per Standing Order 710 says we must be given 3 clear days, or you, the convener, must have ruled the items at the start of the meeting urgent, and you didn't do that. So are these decisions lawful as the Council's standing orders have not been followed? I believe this is a matter of legal interpretation, and I think the Council is entitled to hear from the monitoring officer on this important matter. Thank you.
It would be helpful to know to which reports Councillor Murray is referring.
The reports we've considered.
The reports we've considered when?
At item 6.
I think Mr. Murray's referring to the committee decision reports. These are not reports in the normal sense. This is a record of the decisions taken by the committees. The reports that were submitted by the committees were issued in sufficient time. Those that weren't would have been ruled as urgent items at that time.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. I think if you read Standing Order 710, you'll see that I think I'm correct in my interpretation. I'd like to hear from the monitoring officer, please.
In terms of what exactly, I mean, most of these committee meetings took place last week, and they are here for approval in terms of accuracy as much as anything.
Convener, I'm not sure if Mr. Langley is here, but in any case, I can respond to Councillor Murray and all members on these points in due course. It has been the College practice for many years to consider the decision reports as quickly as possible in order to enable time to debate and decisions to be taken. But I can respond on the merits with Mr. McLeod and Mr. Langley in due course.
Okay, thank you.
Convener, I'd like my point of order minuted, please.
There's no issue with that, and it will be responded to by the Chief Executive as he's just said. But this has been certainly the protocol in terms of the approval of the recommendations in the decision reports. This is the way the council has done this for many, many years.
I'm sorry, Convener, but we didn't get 3 clear days. We received the reports on Friday. That gave us only 2 clear days. So I think that goes against the standing orders. And you said yourself it behoves members to understand fully the standing orders that dictate our decision-making process. Thank you.
Like I said previously, I mean, the Chief Executive will respond to you in writing about this particular issue. But like I said, this has been the standard for a number of years now, that the reports go out by the end of the week for the following week's meetings, and the reports go out for the audit and scrutiny sources and the CORDA. They go out early in the week of these meetings as well. But the Chief Executive will respond to that and circulate that to all members as he has said he will do. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for your attendance at this evening's meeting. And I hope you have a safe journey home. Or to work. Or to work.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.